All right, we are live. This is a special session. I'm super excited. We've never done this at Candor IQ. We have two founders of two headcount workforce planning solutions. I met Eric, who's the founder CEO of Headcount 365. We connected a few weeks ago in person and just had a great time exchanging notes. And we came out of it thinking like it would be really good to have this conversation together, share our learnings, share about how we see the world. So Eric, I'm super excited to have you here on the Candor IQ webinar.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great to meet you live in person. I'm the rising tides raise all ships mentality for the headcount space. Like I've been in the space, using spreadsheets my entire career and left to fix it. So I know it's new. I know it's hard. And there's many different approaches. Different companies that I worked at, we had done it different ways. And so, you know, I love hearing how other people are doing it. It was great to do it in person. And this is just going to be a good conversation about how each of us are approaching and what the benefits are so that people who are interested in this new category, new to the space plus AI, we're going to have a good conversation and have people take away maybe hopefully some learning, something interesting. I don't know, but I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and Eric is founder CEO of Headcount 365, formerly head of talent at Bird, led recruiting at Uber, has been in the space as an operator and experienced the pain point many times over during hyperscale. So the perfect person to talk about this. He's lived in these shoes. Also, he lives in LA now. Is from New Jersey. If you can't tell from the first 30 seconds. But Eric, that's a little bit about you, but I'd love for you to maybe share a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, I've career recruiting. I started out doing campus recruiting at Target, then into agency, then into big tech. The biggest company was Uber. I learned how to do recruiting, capacity, demand forecasting, and building out a relationship with finance. I led talent at Bird, and then after a few other positions, Clutter, Slice, etc., I went to Insight Partners and started my first business, Unicorn Talent, which is now there's a bunch of free resources, comp, leveling framework, capacity demand forecast, interview rubrics, intake sessions, all of the stuff that I used to sell as a consultant across hundreds of companies for Insight Partners, Excel, OpenView, all these different VC firms. That now is free, but I had done so many systems integrations, so many headcount processes, so many what is going on with recruiting and how does finance know about it? What about HR? That we developed a product that kind of filled the gap that we were doing as consultants, which is now Headcount 365. So that's me in a minute or less, I think. But yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And hopefully everyone knows Candor IQ here. We are a headcount planning and compensation planning solution. And I'm in San Francisco. I felt the same pain points as Eric did, but as an operator, as a former chief product officer, as a CTO, spent so much time with my recruiting teams, with my finance teams, with my HR teams, kind of triangulating and saw that rodeo multiple times through hyperscale, through IPO. And that drove me to start this company as well. So I think no better reason to start solve a pain point when you've lived and felt that pain point. And so this should be very exciting. Eric, so I know you talked about some of your past experiences. So what was the moment you realized you wanted to start a company and you wanted to solve this problem?
We would roll out this great manual solution, right? Here's your headcount source of truth. And we would build, report connectors, SFTP. We would connect everything to a spreadsheet and we would have a regular weekly sync. We would go be in a company for, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, have this amazing process and then get called 3 weeks later. And they're like, the spreadsheet broke. Can you help fix it? An automation broke, a formula broke or whatever. And we kept having those calls, which was up until COVID, I guess, great business for consulting because we would go to the office. That got restricted pretty quick. But this combination of okay, we can't go places and fix things or do things. And the kind of baseline for where we do all this work is broken. And we had implemented every tool, every combination of tool. We've used the add-ons, we use the independent tools, the big ERPs. We used everything. We integrated probably every combination. I know probably not based on math, but we've done it all and nothing was working. And so we're like, what if we create this solution? So that was the birth of Headcount 365. Was COVID forced us to rethink how we go about maintaining these things, and what if a software can do it?
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So a lot of people sometimes feel like, hey, the headcount planning problem is a solved problem, right? And it's clearly not. And you see that there's so many signals. There's a lot of impact, to the business. And why do people think it's a solved problem? And why is this problem not actually correctly quantified from your experience?
We have a saying here called distributed benefit consolidated risk. Headcount, the person who cares. The reason we were successful as a consulting firm was the investment bank was like, this is broken. We can see it in this like macroeconomic view of, we see revenue tied to sellers who aren't being hired on time and terminations creating gaps in existing service, yada, yada, yada. Like, they gave them money. We want people to produce results so that we could, make our money, right? That was the concept. So this investment bank had this view and could get to the CEO and say, fix it. As a software, we go in through the tactical layer. And when you get to the leader, it works for them. They have a process that works because they just make people do more work, and they've built already in this is the acceptable accuracy. And sometimes, not to go off on a little mini tangent here, but sometimes it's preferred, right? If I am a finance person or an executive leader and I'm trying to hit a budget and I know that headcount's slow, I can actually bank on that savings to then use elsewhere. And that kind of gives me a little bit of freedom. So if I come in and solve a problem for you, everyone's life, right? 6-10 people get 20% better, but not one of them wants to make that 20%. If it bombs, if it fails, this new software that's coming in, like, if it doesn't work out, I take all the risk. It's my fault. I brought it in. I advocated for it. And so you have to find a way to add up all the value across all the different people to then have it is beneficial for the company. So it's been a very interesting sales problem to solve. But I was thinking this when you were making your intros, like, there are things that I thought of were truth as a recruiter or a person that had my background. And then you start talking to hiring managers, they have a different perception, and there's different problems to solve. And what do they care about? What do they not care about? Like, there's so many different approaches to this problem. There's so many people who benefit in a distributed way. And then there's one, maybe two people who want to make this monumental change to the process. You come into this idea of like, okay, it is solved for us. It's good enough. It's working. And you have to like really find that value. That's what we've been running into. I don't know if you've experienced the same.
Yeah, this is one of those problems I describe as a multiplayer problem, right? Like, there are other parallels. So sometimes when I explain to people, like, hey, in R&D, and engineering has their GitHubs and their engineering toolkit, right? And product managers have their thing, and designer has Figma. But then the reason why things like Linear and Jira and all these like tools exist and are massive is because you actually need that cross-team collaboration. Same with sales and marketing and support and ops, etc. Jobs aren't done in companies within one department, right? So when you're hiring someone, yes, the recruiter is the tip of the spear at there, but finance cares about the budget, the cash flow. The manager obviously cares about hiring the right person. HR cares about the right org design. And so this is a problem that touches so many different personas. And so sometimes it's hard to see, because if you just build a tool only for recruiting or only for finance, it doesn't solve the core problem. You have to build something that is more of a multiplayer, more of an operating system, that living, breathing between these different people, these different functions. So I think that gets missed a lot. And it's hard to define that.
100%. And that's what when I was doing the consulting, like, we would use the HRIS tool that had a headcount module, but if it didn't connect with finance or didn't communicate with recruiting, then yes, it solved that one siloed team's if you look at a 3 or 4 or 5 circle Venn diagram, operating in the middle is difficult. When you are in one circle or in a smaller shared circle, and you're the decision maker on the HRIS, or you're the decision maker on the FP&A tool, you're like, I'm solving my problem, the rest of you deal with it. And so solving a in the middle problem, there are, I don't know how many compromises you would make or Headcount 365 would make to like solve one person for the benefit of the whole ecosystem. We try not to like lean too hard or bias it one way. We try to stay in the middle, which again, another sales problem, but also over the course of time, I think will be good for us to kind of like, it's a good foundation to build on. It's truly solving the headcount problem. And that's just like that's a fine line.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't know if you've seen this, Eric. Like one of the other things I see is like garbage in, garbage out, right? So like bad data leads to bad decisions, and then there's like who's responsible for cleaning the data, maintaining the data, having all the right information, whether it's like for an opening, whether it's for budget, whether it's for like timing, sequence, location, like all this. There's a lot of data, and that I think about that a lot. And when we do work with organizations, that's usually one of the first places we look at to kind of assess.
100%. Yeah, the data is a big problem to solve. Our approach philosophically is to separate display or user data from machine data. So in order for people to collaborate on the same data set and have the things they want, they want to see their thing. But to link it to everyone else's stuff, you need this other ID that's unified across all the other teams so that you can track the display information independent of what their scenario, hypothesis, whatever it is, right? Like people want to do what they want to do. I think that's kind of one of the core things that's helped us unlock a lot is people still, you can sell to somebody all you want, like, no, it's better for the company. But unless you're talking to the company person who's going to change that person's behavior, our decision makers, they still want to do what we want to do. So our options are do it at the expense of everyone else, tell them no, or come up with this way to do it. It's extremely complicated, but that data cleanliness is the only way that we've seen success with people kind of like having the same flexibility as a spreadsheet, but still having this center of the Venn diagram solution. And to get there, I don't know what your implementations are like. There is a lot of data cleanup. The amount of extra information in any of the 3 systems, or even as simple as, the finance system calls it HR, the recruiting system calls it people, the HRIS calls it, operations, people operations. They have to be to some extent unified, so we're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And like, what's the impact that you've seen? Like, what's the most expensive headcount mistake that you've seen people make? Like, is there an example, of course, without naming names, like, or like a typical thing that comes to mind? I'm happy to share my stories too.
Yeah, no, I think they're probably very similar, right? So someone hires something not on the plan. There's a side approval that does something that impacts the rest of the business. I think my career, like the inspiration for part of the functionality of Headcount 365 is when I was at Uber, there was something called the Covington Report. I don't know if you remember this. This was like Time Magazine. So this woman, Susan Fowler, was like, had the worst experience at Uber, went to Time Magazine, this big Covington Report, like, and it was about pay discrepancy, right? And if you look at the compensation philosophy of Uber, it was like equity heavy, and you would get this big total comp number, and a lot of people made a lot of money off of that, great. But what would happen is you had this low base comp number, and then people would negotiate to get closer to what they were expecting in their previous role. So if you already have a systemic inequality that comes from compensation, before you get to a place where you have to negotiate for your compensation, then you just promote the systemic inequality, and you end up in this situation where it's like, how many people at the offer stage negotiated, and how far away is it from your comp, and what is the variance, and who's creating the variance, like all that stuff. That cost Salesforce had to do a big comp
Yeah, I was there at
refresh, right?
Salesforce when that happened.
Right. Uber did the Covington report. CEO, see ya, gone. You know what I mean? And it's like these were from the headcount plan issues that, I've said these during this. I don't think it moves the needle at all during this. People are like, nah, it'll never happen to us. And then it happened to them. But that to me is like, if I wanted to quantify this huge, like, this is the fear monger of not having a headcount software. There are many other reasons. Then it's like, yeah, how do you control inequality? How do you control variance? How do you know who's doing it? How do you know when it happens? How do you know who approved it? And that has these long-term impacts that just crush these companies who especially are in hyperscale mode. And that to me is the big one. But like, we'll see with a customer, maybe like 1 to 3 million a year of like savings, or we'll call it better financial performance. I don't know if it's saving so much as like they just have a better handle on what they would have normally had in a slush fund based on all this, headcount disparity.
Yeah, and I think like the kind of the what you're describing at the tail end is like the variance, right? The delta, and so that's absolutely like an impact, and like you can quantify the value. But then I think the problem that doesn't get measured is the examples you're giving earlier, like the Susan Fowler one. Maybe no bigger example actually, but like I experienced that too at a company where we went public, but we didn't. We didn't do the best job in terms of thinking through like post IPO, like hiring plan, tying it to the Wall Street story, and we hired and acquired in the areas where that we weren't like pitching, and ultimately like we had to make really deep cuts. We had to do deep reorgs, and the first year post going public is not when you want to make structural changes. You want it to be smooth sailing. You tell the Wall Street X, and then you do X plus 5% or 10%, or and that's what you want to do. And so people think the headcount plan is just a headcount plan, but headcount plan is actually your company strategy, your product strategy, your execution. It's the largest line item on the balance sheet. It's all of those things. And I think once you get it wrong, it's not something you can correct so quickly. It's like, like the next week. Sometimes these things, like you'll feel the impact of it 6 months later, right? And then you have to make harder adjustments. And so being proactive, being ahead of the curve, I don't think it's actually being ahead of the curve. It's being on the curve, but trying to look around the corners to make sure your headcount plans are aligned with like your execution and your goals is actually business strategy. So that's my take there.
I mean, and why I like reading your case studies, why I like doing my case studies is there's a part of it that is value today, right? Like you buy this software, you get something today, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in this webinar. But there's a long, one of the things that I'm working towards in some of my longest standing customers is like, what is the value of year over year data, right? If you start 2022, 2023, 2024 with 100 recs, and at the end of the year, you have a different amount of new hires, and then you start with X amount of people, then at the end of the year, you have a different amount of people, and the financials, the budget, right? Year over year, you can start to identify these patterns, these trends, how do we get better at the workforce planning, the succession planning, the things that are you can learn from this data set, right? We solved a lot of, when I was a consultant, we solved your today problems, and it would break when we left, which was kind of a bummer. But in a software, we can now say, what is the aggregate impact of every single year that you've made an improvement? And so if you always have hiring surges or terminations after commission payouts or equity refreshers or whatever, you can be a little bit more proactive about some of the things that cause tactical gaps in a year. And so the workforce planning gets stronger. So I think, this is a long-term play. I think it makes it, we're all creating this thing together, right? All the different headcount founders, we're creating this thing together, and we're all taking our different approaches to provide the value today in the hopes that the folks who trust us there and stay with us long term can then take this data set of headcount, of workforce, and actually get it into a room that is like, oh, it makes clear sense why we need to be better at this thing. I can use workforce data for the executive team. We can elevate the, perception of this, organization and its influence over the business outcomes. And that's what gets me excited. If it wasn't obvious.
No, absolutely. And Eric, we talked about like there's different personas involved. So I think it'll be a fun exercise to go through like these different personas and talk about their pain points and what they see and like the value for each one. And let's start with our favorite one, the finance teams, right? Superpower spreadsheet. But so like, what are some of the problems that finance teams face that they can't necessarily solve with spreadsheets? That that they need to own and address, and maybe that our tools can help, but it doesn't have to be, right? Maybe it's the right process, maybe something they build in-house. But let's start with the finance persona and like what's your take there?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's a couple of conversations to have. There's like value today, value tomorrow, and then what's the difference between software and AI, right? So value today, the main thing that we have is a one-to-one match of what is the recruiting team working on, and does that align with the finance plan? So that's traditionally done in a spreadsheet with a ID that may or may not permeate some of the changes that managers make. For example, if you take one role and split it into two, or you want to take a future role and combine it with one today so that you can hire for more money, like the manager is not incentivized to produce the financials that the finance team cares about. And so, in the on spreadsheet version, you're doing that manual, you're doing it with an email, et cetera. In a software, you're doing it with an approval, and you're both working off the same data, the same math. And I think the difficulty of replicating this with AI is the idea that the unique, unless you have a unique identifier for what both systems are talking about, you leave a lot up to that model to fill in the blanks. And so you'll see some accuracy issues on AI. But I think the finance person wants to know what's going on with recruiting, understand what's going on from HR. And what I see particularly from HR is vacant seats. Who left? Are we backfilling them? Can I claw that money back or not? And then from the business, it's all about managing variance. What did we think you were going to do, and how that actually turn out? And getting that, in my consulting role, we said if you did once a month, you were good, right? Before month end close, if you could close the month out, you did a great job. And we're at once a minute now, so it gives a more fidelity, this fidelity of data back to that team. But just trying to track it all in manual spreadsheet based ID numbers with meetings to capture the variance and your own financial calculations and reconciling, et cetera. That's the problem that we're solving for finance. Just give me the record and put it right in my FP&A tool.
Yeah, I think those are great points there. And I'll add the other thing I see from finance and after is empowering the finance team to drive accountability, like auditability, sometimes good behavior, alignment. Because what I see is like even like the most dialed in finance teams, when they have their like FP&A tool or a spreadsheet, then to your point, they have to have all the meetings, they have to have the Slack updates, they have to like, maybe there's a Google form, they have to accept, reject, or change. And if you can empower them to communicate like what the rules are, like if there's budget rules, time rules, leveling rules, location rules, if they have guidance, they can program some of those things. That's one. So that like the manager, the recruiter, everyone like has that information handy at the time of making the request or making that decision, right? So you don't have to keep like, hey, this is what we said we, conversation that happens on a weekly basis or sometimes daily. And I think it also empowers then those people to like, kind of do it themselves, right? Like more DIY, instead of it having to be like a hub and spoke model where every little change has to kind of run through finance. You can empower the manager, the recruiter, or the executive. And so then the finance team is not chasing after those things and can be more strategic.
Yeah, I think the value today is creating that one source of truth where everyone works off the same data set, so you don't have to do hub and spoke. That is like, for me, what gets deals across the table. Some of the like 201 stuff that we're trying to now do with our finance teams is like, I wrote this article a year ago, and we're starting to have it come true now that we can integrate with the headcount data into somebody's Claude model, is predictions about headcount that have a real impact on revenue. What I mean by that is like, and it's not just revenue generating headcount, but it's all managers, I'm sure, have a certain amount of attrition that they'd like to get in front of. So if you do reactive attrition where somebody quits, then you request the backfill, recruiting fills it, then they start, then they ramp. The gap between the exit and the person starting is huge. And so if you can predict an exit, then you can hire ahead of time with a nominal impact on the actual OpEx and still capture that revenue. So like a salesperson leaving might have a gap of 3, 4, 5, 6 months before they're ramped up. If you can predict based on things in the HRIS or your year-over-year workforce data, who will leave and when they'll leave, then you can open seats predictively, and that kind of helps close the revenue gap while not adding too much cost. And that's, when you start thinking about what can a software do over a process, right? I'm sure there's finance people like, I've had that too. Like people are like, oh, my spreadsheet works. I'm happy with it. I get all this value. I have all that power.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, can you predict? And they're like, well, not yet. And it's like, okay, well, you can't do that yet. And I think there's a lot of room with the finance teams to kind of do stuff like that once you incorporate the headcount inputs into their financial forecast.
Totally. Yeah. And so that's I know we can talk about each of these personas for a long time. So it sounds like maybe we need a one-on-one therapy session here.
I know, that's true.
But let's jump into the one that you lived in, right? The recruiting persona. So like, what are the challenges that the recruiting team faces? What they can't do with just an ATS? Like, what are the things that they need help with in the headcount process?
I've been trying this new pitch out. I'll tell you if it works eventually, but it's like we're everything pre-ATS. So, the easy stuff is we link what's on the headcount plan into whatever your ATS is, so you don't have to type it all in. That's one of the main value points. But the things that we're doing for a recruiting leader are things like capacity demand forecasting, which is how many recruiters do I have and is that enough? We do workload balancing. So I'm not sure if you've heard of like a point system, or how many recs should a recruiter have and will they fill them on time, right? There's workload balancing, there's prioritization management, there's requests and approvals, what new stuff is going to come to the team. And then there's using the headcount data in reporting. So one of the hardest things to do in a spreadsheet that software does really well is what happened, right? What did we start with and what did I tell you we were going to do versus what did we end with and what actually happened? What are all the changes? Who did all those changes? What was their impact and how do we drive accountability? So I'll give you some examples. You're recruiting for a manager and then all of a sudden you want a VP. Well, your whole pipeline out the door and you now need to restart. So you're not going to hit that on time. But the amount of times I've been in an exec meeting where we didn't fill something on time, but it changed 2 weeks before it was supposed to be filled. There was another big one at Uber. We wanted to hire the GM for France, and we had less than 3 months to do it, but there's a 90-day notice period in France. So there's just things, there's guardrails, there's data, there's information that if you're a recruiting leader and you're trying to answer questions like, how many recruiters do I need? If we hit the plan, who performed and who didn't? If we missed the plan, whose fault was it and why? And if you're a recruiting leader, doing that in spreadsheets is like, that was 40 hours every month or quarter whenever I had to make my presentation minimum to produce that information. Software lets you do it in a click.
Yeah. And like the examples that come to mind for me, Eric, everything you said is absolutely true. And it took a bunch of notes as well, like in my head, like the way you framed it, pretty on point. Is recruiting in some ways kind of like a sales job, right? And like there's a pipeline and there's a process and there's volume, Yes, there's a art to it, absolutely. There's a relationship, but there's also a science to it too. And a lot of organizations, they call, CEO. I'm guilty of this too, but CEO comes from, or CFO comes from a board meeting. They're like, okay, we need to hire these 30 people, and then 24 hours later, the CEO is like, hey, how come recruiting team? Why don't you have an active pipeline of like 20 engineers, 10 sales reps? And the recruiting team is like, we had no idea. Like we didn't like we didn't even have a semblance of an idea that we needed to hire these people. We need to hire these up front. And now like suddenly all the headcounts green lit, and expectation is that like next week we're gonna have a meeting, and the recruiting team needs to show like how much of the pipeline we filled, what does our velocity look like, and all of these different things. And that's not how this works. Like it takes time to dial it in, build up the volume, have momentum, like and for every single role. And so I think there's an opportunity to give the recruiting team a little bit more of a heads up, right? Like, hey, this is coming down the pipe, potentially. Like, here's a headcount that's like moving along in the approval workflow, or here's a scenario, and here's the dates and the metrics or KPIs that it's keying off. So like it might, green light. So I think there's a massive opportunity to help the recruiting team be a little bit more proactive and kind of plan for what's coming ahead.
Barbara from Shark Tank loves spite founders. She loves founders who have something to prove. Okay, and I won't soapbox like this often, but I had the privilege of seeing the boardroom, right, approaching recruiting from an investor's lens, and it doesn't look good in there. They're not a fan of the recruiting team's performance because of the lack of a forecasting ability that, in my opinion, is not a skills issue. It's not that people don't know that there's recruiting capacity or workload balancing. It's like there hasn't been an investment in giving someone the tool like a Salesforce to manage. If a rep can close X amount of deals and you're asking them their quota is 10X that amount, they're just not going to hit it. And that is an acceptable science in sales, but it's not it's not methodical in recruiting, and it doesn't permeate all the way up to this boardroom where you can put a capacity demand forecast in front of someone and say, like, if you want these roles, this is what we need. And I come from the background where all recruiting problems are solvable, as is everything, with enough money. So if you want the hires on time, we need contractors, we need agencies. But if you don't give me enough time and we have to do that, cheap, fast, reliable, right? We have to spend the money, and it gets expensive. And so it's a big, I think there's a lot of room from a systems perspective to take care of everything pre-ATS, which is why I'm trying to market it like that. But TBD, we'll see how it works. But that's the main. We started out as a recruiting tool. My first product was the capacity demand forecast. No integrations with anything, just like my first product was that. And so we're built around it. Anyway, Barbara, we don't really take investment here, but if we did, you'd be the one. If you're listening, I'm sure she is.
I always wanted a Shark Tank reference in my webinars, so I've checked that box there.
Oh man, who else do we have? HR. Exactly. HR is a big one. I saw a lot of HR responders in the attendees. So if you're still here, this one's for you.
Yeah, Eric. So what do you think about the challenges from an HR standpoint? Let's dive right in.
There's I'd say basic stuff like pricing jobs, comping jobs, span of control, like what is the information about the org charts, vacant seats, anything that doesn't have a center of gravity in the HRIS getting exposure to, so that you can see what does the org chart look like with the hiring manager's proposed headcount changes, right? You can see the span of control. You can see the, one manager who has all the different directors, right? So that the tactical stuff of right now is kind of what they latch onto in our demos, the HR teams. I still sell the big picture, like long-term comp equity and figuring out where comp variance comes from, level variance comes from, and mapping titles and levels across different business units, that there's some level of consistency. Like if you want to see my strategy, on Unicorn, you could download my comp and leveling framework, and it just shows you the way I would go in and do a comp exercise. It's very basic, right? I'm sure it lasts up to like 1,000 employees, but it's not like super custom. But it just shows a level of consistency, and I think HR folks want to see that that level of data. And then the last thing is workforce planning. So if you know what your workforce is doing year over year, then you can succession plan. You can identify risks. You can see what terminations are forecasted. There's a lot of stuff in the leavers joiners mentality of what does a workforce look like. That is, we call it enhanced or enriched data from the headcount plan, because you have hiring manager actions, recruiter actions, finance actions logged on the same unique ID that you get to read as an HR person, where that would just be in a spreadsheet, and that change wouldn't necessarily be captured and yours to consume.
Yeah, I think the impact to HR is one of those things that you measure 6 months later, right? Because you ended up didn't bring in the right people, and then now HR is like every business unit leader is like, hey, we don't have the right org to achieve our goals, and like who's responsible for this, and like then HR has to kind of manage it, and like it creates fire drills. So I gave you the example of like the rifts or layoffs. You mentioned succession planning, and so then you have to the course correction happens at like HR. There's a lot of fighting fires that has to happen, and there's an opportunity to, instead of fight fires, be more forward looking, right? Less spreadsheets, more strategy. And so I think that's a big one. The other thing that kind of comes to mind, this is more tactical, is every organization wants to kind of be able to track the full kind of life cycle, right? From a position, like whether it's a new headcount backfill to a hire to an employee that's onboarded, so that they can like really kind of own that end-to-end like employee journey and do reporting and analytics around it as well. And time to fill, time to onboard, and that's hard to do when you have so many different systems. And so like if you have that single, you were mentioning it too, like position ID, and you're connected to the ATS and you're connected to the HRIS, then you can kind of help companies build that journey. And I think that's also like something really key for companies as they scale, which not solve problem right now at all.
Totally agree. I think when I was in HR, it was expectations, right? And the main ones, I don't know what percentage it would be today. I've been out of the game for like 5 years. I haven't been in internal HR, but like same title, different pay. Same pay, different title. That's most of the issues that you have. And sometimes it's like, you joined later and the strike price went up, so you got less equity. And sometimes it's a process of hiring, and sometimes it's, some stuff you got to solve as an HR person. But if you don't have all the information across everybody, it's hard to do that in a way that's, like you said, proactive. So I think we're both solving that in our own ways.
Yeah. All right. Shifting gears. So manager or executive, like what's your take there? Like what are the problems there that they're facing?
I would say they want what they want. The headcount is one of the things they do, and they don't care about it. If you're predominantly blocked, like all of our customers, the biggest headcount owner is always our biggest champion, but then everyone else kind of like, they're like, all right, I'll log in when I have to hire someone and go do it. So they want it to be easy. I want to raise a request. I want to know where it's at. I want it to automatically fill in. Like, I want this position, make it happen, right? And I think like the easier you can do that for a manager, that's their tactical. From a bigger picture perspective, it's scenario planning. So different companies offer different things, right? You can do it in app, you could do it in an AI, but the idea that I want to just maybe hypothesize, I want to trade, I want to add, I want to get rid of that one and hire this one. They're interested in that type of stuff. And you can do so with a tool. You can see how many vacancies do I have? Where are my backfills? What's on my hiring plan? What's approved? Where's my approval at? And you get the base information. And I think for the biggest hiring managers, there's a case to be made about what it does for you in the future. But, if I'm going to be the most candid founder you could be, if every executive is one review, one positive or negative, and there's 8 managers or 50 managers, and one of them or two of them are getting this max value, the other 48 have an equal vote on how it's going, and they just want it to be easy. So
yeah, cool. I know we like jammed for 40 minutes. We have the last five minutes, so let's kind of get into it, Eric. So like the last two things. So like 3 years looking ahead, what does headcount planning look like for you? What's the success state in the world?
for me, it's maybe you use our tool, maybe you use our data. I think with AI becoming so prevalent, people are going to want to, we'll see how the centralized tools work, but we want to create a single data set that everyone trusts to go somewhere, whether it goes into our UI or it goes into your corporate cloud. I don't know if I care really, but I think what we want to do is add the data to the conversation. I think companies that are not using workforce data, headcount data, plan data, all of the different information that's siloed in these 3 systems and maybe not unified, if you can unify it, clean it, remove all the permission, I don't want a low-level hiring manager to look up the CEO's salary, yada, 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 right? If you could just get them what they need, where they want it, they can then use it for whatever it is they want to do in the future. And that's what we're trying to do. Not to break too many product releases here, but this idea of UI optional, I think a lot of we're a recovering SaaS tool. You know what I mean? We started SaaS. So I think a lot of the companies just want it. They want what they want. So you can use our tool, you cannot use our tool, but you should definitely use our data.
Yeah, that makes sense. Go headless, and it's really the values, like the data and how it compounds. All right, so rapid fire questions. Are you ready for that?
Lightning round, hit me.
All right, so I'm going to give you a few work questions and one personal one as well. So
do it.
What's one sign that a company's headcount planning process is breaking?
I'd say approvals, a lot of stale approvals. If you're not getting if people request something, you don't get it, it's not happening, decisions aren't being made, you see a lot of executive tension around like, where's my stuff and why? They're not on the same set of data. Yeah. I don't know if my answers are supposed to be rapid fire, but that's one of them.
That's fine. That's an answer. So then next one, what is one metric that finance, recruiting, HR should be tracking around headcount planning?
Plan change rate. What did I start with? What did I end with? Why did it change?
Perfect. What's something like how will AI change headcount planning in the next 3 years?
You can take data from headcount and combine it with other data that you wouldn't normally integrate with a headcount system to produce a better insight. So where are my sellers? How are my sellers doing? How are my current sellers doing? What sellers do I plan to hire? What is my forecast in Salesforce? What is my Gong? What are my best performers doing from Gong? How's it look in the financial forecast? Put that all into AI and you can work on your own stuff.
Okay. And Langer's Deli or Cat's Deli?
I mean, I'm Cat's all the way. I went to Langer's. It's expensive. It's a lot of money for a pastrami sandwich, but so is Cat's nowadays. But at least they give you the free taste up front.
There we go. All right, there we go. Awesome. Hey, Eric, thanks so much for jamming with me and sharing your insights, your experiences, your journey, and I'm excited that we can help build out the space together.
Yeah, it's been awesome getting to know you. I think we're both creating value. We have these different approaches that are equally as valuable, and I'm excited to be doing this alongside of you. I think I'd love to have you on the podcast if I could pitch it at the end of this, but we'll do some more stuff. I like it.
All right, we'll figure it out. All right, thank you.
All right.
Okay. Bye, everyone.